I have lots of good intentions that I fail to follow through on. I intend to eat well, I intend to exercise, I intend to save money, I intend to vote in every single election. We all have lots of good intentions that we fail to follow through on. As a behavioral scientist, I'm a behavioral scientist at Harvard, I study the gap between intention and action. Specifically, my work helps develop tools to turn mass intention into mass behavior. And in order, I'm going to illustrate this work with progress that collaborators and I have made in a single area, which is voter mobilization. And now to tell that story, I want to go back to 2002, a long time ago, where I had a full head of hair. I was volunteering for Bob Reich for Governor's campaign. It was a very brief campaign in the primary. And the weekend before the election, I was making phone calls where we were calling our supporters. And I would use the standard script. I would call someone like this woman, and I would say, hello, it's an important election, it's close, it's your civic duty to vote, it's easy to vote, do you intend to vote? She, like everyone, when hearing such a pushing script, says, yes, I intend to vote. And I'd say, great, good night. Political scientists have studied each of the elements of that script, which is what you would expect should mobilize and motivate any rational person. If it's close, if it's important, if it's your civic duty, and if it's costless or low cost. And what they found is that each of those elements has no effect on people's likelihood of voting when included in a voter mobilization script. So as a psychologist, I'm a behavioral scientist. I tried to think about it with collaborators from the science of decision-making and behavior change. What would make people more likely to follow through on their intentions to vote other than these rational elements? And so what I'm going to talk about are three of the range of things we've uncovered that can help to mobilize people to turn their intentions into actions. The first is prompt a plan. The second is leverage positive peer pressure. And the third is reinforce identity. So my objective here is to share three behavioral science insights, but also to illustrate how the use of a behavioral science approach and randomized controlled experiments can be used to turn mass intention into mass action. So the first experiment, I'm going to tell the first principle, which is prompt a plan, I'm going to tell a little bit more detail about. So working with a political scientist named David Nickerson, we ran an experiment in the 2008 Democratic primary between Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. It was a long, drawn-out primary, you may remember, and this is around the middle of it. And we chose 300,000 voters from the voter file. The voter file, many people don't realize this, it's public record if you vote. It's not public record how you vote, but if you vote, it's public record. So we use this file to choose our experiment universe, and we also later use the file to use as an outcome measure to see whether you vote or not. And so of this 300,000 eligible voters in that primary, we put a big group in the control, which we didn't contact at all. We then contact another group where we call them, we say, please vote, it's really important, please vote. And we look at how that affected turnout. And it had no effect on turnout, which is consistent with literally dozens of experiments that political scientists have conducted, that people are not failing to vote because they don't know it's important and they don't know there's an election. So another group we call, please vote, it's important. Do you intend to vote? We basically prompt them to make a concrete intention. And what we find, since 95% of people intend to vote, that's what we find in this experiment also, it increases turnout 2 percentage points. Now remember, elections are very close, and this 2 percentage points is often the margin, and it's really hard to change turnout, having run a bunch of these experiments. So in the final group, we say, please vote, please vote, please vote. Do you intend to vote? Nearly everyone says yes. We then say, okay, what time will you vote? How will you get there? Where will you be coming from? We prompt them to make a plan. And what we find is that it more than doubles the impact of what at the time was the most common and best practice script, which was the self-prediction script. So adding this battery of questions to prompt a plan doubled the impact of the next best script. The takeaway, people are more likely to follow through when they are prompted to make a plan. Second, principle number 2 is leverage positive peer pressure. So now we usually think of peer pressure as a bad thing. But peer pressure can also be used to help people follow through on their intentions, their positive, good intentions. So Alan Gerber, who's a political scientist, and I ran a series of experiments where we convinced people that turnout was going to be high, or we convinced them that turnout was going to be low. And before getting the results, we polled a bunch of experts in voter mobilization They're called political consultants. And we asked them which they thought would be more effective, and they were split. They had no intuition on this. And the results showed that people were much more motivated to vote when they believed lots of other people were voting. And that's principle number 2. People are more likely to follow through when they believe that lots of other people are also performing that behavior. Principle number 3 is reinforce identity. So this begins with a first-order insight that how people behave is affected by how they see themselves, and how they see themselves is highly malleable. So to make this concrete, I have lots of different identities, one of which is I am a loving father of 2 adorable children. I am also a rabid fan of the Philadelphia Eagles, which is a football team. When I am thinking of myself as a loving father, I may have a different set of behavioral tendencies than when I'm thinking of myself as a Philadelphia Eagles fan. So when I'm driving, for example, and someone cuts me off, I may respond differently if I'm thinking of myself as my 2 kids are adorable and I love them, or if I think, I hope Michael Vick doesn't get hurt next week, right? So for example, I may be slightly more aggressive in response when I think of myself as an Eagles fan. Similarly, we all have lots of different identities that are competing in any moment. One of which is we think of ourselves as good citizens, as the kinds of people who vote, as voters. And in a series of experiments with psychologists Carol Dweck, Greg Walton, and Chris Bryan, we found that emphasizing and reinforcing as a voter, as the kind of person who votes, be a voter, motivated people to vote more than saying, please vote, you can vote as someone who can vote. That reinforcing the voter identity made them more likely to follow through. Takeaway number 3, people are more likely to follow through when the relevant identity has been reinforced. So going back to 2002 when I was speaking to the supporter of the Reich campaign, what I should have said was, remember to make a plan. What time will you vote? How will you get there? Where will you be coming from? I should have leveraged positive peer pressure, and I should have reinforced the voter identity. So I study voter mobilization, and I pay attention to what all the campaigns and candidates do to mobilize their supporters. So I've seen this research used in TV ads and radio ads and mailers, in door knockers, in phone scripts. But I paid careful attention to the presidential campaign in 2012. So I live in Cambridge, Massachusetts, so you may not be surprised that I volunteered for the Obama campaign the weekend before the election to make phone calls for their supporters to mobilize voters. You may be more surprised to know that I volunteered for the Romney campaign the weekend before the election to mobilize their supporters. And the reason, I wanted to know what their scripts look like. And so, what I found in the Obama script was that they prompted a plan. They leveraged positive peer pressure. They reinforced the voter identity. They used all of this published research that was all published in peer-reviewed scholarly journals and widely written about in the political press. Now, the Romney campaign didn't prompt a plan. It didn't leverage positive peer pressure, and it didn't reinforce the voter identity, which, independent of my political preferences, is baffling because it was published research that had been widely written about. Now, in the postmortems to the 2012 election, the Republicans have made very clear that there was a behavioral science gap, among other gaps, and that they have begun investing to close this gap. And so in 2014, it wouldn't surprise me if everyone used this published research on the behavioral science has shown to double or triple the impact per dollar spent on voter mobilization. But that's not the point of the talk. I use that as an illustration, voting, of one of the areas where we have this gap between what we intend to do and what we actually do. Saving, exercise, diet, reducing energy use, adhering to medical, pharmaceutical plans. And there are lots of these sort of gaps. Smoking, lots of them where we fail to follow through on our virtuous good intentions. In fact, my current research is in education, where students often really intend to do their homework and to pay attention in class, but have a hard time following through. And parents genuinely intend to support their students and help them be more effective students, but have a hard time following through. My current research is using these behavioral science insights and randomized experiments to try to develop tools to sort of facilitate this kind of follow through. My intention with this talk was to share a handful of behavioral science insights to illustrate how useful they can be in bridging this gap between intention and action. And my hope is that it's useful to you as you try to bridge these intention and behavior gaps also. Thank you.